Darren Heitner, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's my great pleasure. You are a sports entertainment and intellectual property lawyer. You're founder of Heitner Legal. You're an adjunct professor. You're an author, a lot of things. But I would like to start in 2005. As a New Year's resolution, you started Sports Agent blog. So how did that come to life?
I did. So we actually should go back a little bit further. The summer of 2005, it was between my sophomore and junior years of study at University of Florida. And I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to intern at a sports agency in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a tremendous experience. But at the end of about 2, 3 months of working in that capacity in the sports agency management division, I came back to school feeling a void that I really wanted to continue to learn more about the profession, to make a name for myself, to build those connections in an industry that at the time I believed I was destined to become a part of. And it took me a few months, but ultimately, as you mentioned, it was a New Year's resolution in 2005 that I started up this website. And it was originally titled, I Want to Be a Sports Agent. Thereafter, I purchased the domain name sportsagentblog.com, renamed it Sports Agent Blog, and it still survives to this day. It's not nearly as active in pushing out new content, but every so often there is new content that's published, and a few things that's continued to be provided are lists attaching the player names to agent names for the major professional sport drafts. And that's been a resource that I've heard from others in the industry that they're very fond of and appreciate.
That's incredible. And of course, it's being a sports agent, there are several movies that have inspired this career path as well. And you did become a sports agent in 2007 around, right?
I did. So another inflection point where I was going from my undergraduate studies to my legal studies, staying in Gainesville, Florida, going to University of Florida Levin College of Law, where it was actually with one of my original contributors at Sports Agent Blog, I decided to create a sports agency from scratch. We created it without ever meeting each other in person and built it up throughout my 3 years of law school. At one point in time, we actually ended up parting ways, and he started a separate agency. But it was a very interesting experience intending to grow this brand at the same time that I was studying in law school for 3 years. And after graduating, my intention had been to just continue to grow this business. I came to Fort Lauderdale, Florida from Gainesville with that intention in mind. Lo and behold, took a lunch meeting and decided I would try practicing as a lawyer. It was never my intention, even though I had gone to law school. And about halfway through my first year of practicing, I made the decision to stop being a sports agent, transition into full-time practicing as a lawyer, and started to actually build up a book of business representing sports agents and their clients with their legal concerns.
Hmm. And your first client was a bowler, right?
Well, going back to, I guess it was 2007, thereabouts. Yeah, I think my first client was a professional bowler. If I remember correctly, his name's Mike Devaney. And then from there, I actually signed up many other professional bowlers, believe it or not. At the time, I was not in a position to be picky as to who my clients would be. And I realized that it was an area that was largely ignored by professional representatives. And I was able to very quickly get my feet wet reviewing and negotiating contracts. And it was a very rewarding experience. But I'm sure you can imagine that a lot of people's eyes opened up wide when they heard that I was representing professional bowlers. I got a few chuckles in response.
I'm sure it's not the first sport that comes to mind, but you need to start somewhere, right?
That's
So,
right.
so how much was the law degree helpful there? You talked about, reviewing contracts and all of this.
Well, I think Well, I know that when I went to law school, as I mentioned, I didn't necessarily do it with the intention of practicing law. Outside of just delaying reality and becoming an adult, I was genuinely interested in not only learning the law, but opening up my mind into thinking differently and being able to take any side of a position and hopefully argue it effectively and learn the important negotiation and mediation skills. I think the practical part of law school was very helpful. And while it's not necessary to have that legal education as a backdrop to become a sports agent, many very successful sports agents have never stepped a foot into a law school. I do think that there are many elements of law school that do provide an advantage to those who are practicing in the space.
And what would some of those be, except for like the law aspects of contracts? Something else that comes to mind?
As I mentioned, outside of having that background in contract law, the practical areas of learning how to negotiate effectively, I think, are invaluable and not something that I really learned outside of the law school context. There are plenty books and some that I've read that I think are valuable to supplement, but having going to law school and having that ability to learn that sort of practical from that sort of practical education, I think is very valuable. Outside of that, in my line of practice, and I think even if you're just being an agent, it's important to have a background in intellectual property, understanding trademarks, copyrights, the granting of rights in general, rights of publicity, et cetera. NIL is a big thing now. Well, that's combined within publicity rights, which is a form of intellectual property. So that's certainly an area that can benefit an agent as well.
Definitely. And we will go into more to the NIL a little bit later here, but you spoke out about some, let's call them challenges of being an agent. It's expensive in the beginning. You might have capped commissions, a lot of travel. So how did you experience this time as an agent and now yeah, with regards to these things?
Well, you point out a few things. It's very expensive, especially if you're intending to do it on your own. You have to have a pretty sizable war chest to recruit, to travel, to provide stipends, housing, other sorts of benefits to athletes that you look to represent. And, then retaining those athletes after you've actually successfully recruited them. There's the challenge of constantly traveling if you have a family, particularly a young and growing family. Many sleepless nights because you're always afraid that your competitors are going to try to pry away your most valuable clients. I lived through that. The margins are extremely low. Many of the professional associations, the unions, cap the fees. For instance, with the NFL Players Association, fees are capped at 3%. And oftentimes you have to go below that to be competitive. Basketball with the NBPA, it's 4%. And again, many agents are taking less than that in order to remain competitive. And then if you want to go work for somebody, you're probably going to be taking a low salary and maybe have it a hybrid of salary and commission based. But you still have to somehow get your foot in the door. It's highly competitive. It's a brutal industry to break into and to survive and flourish within. Now, I credit those agents, many of whom I work with today as their counsel for being able to do so. And particularly the younger ones who have been able to break through those barriers. And it's certainly possible, but it's hard.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you did the even harder way in the terms of that you started your own company instead of joining an agency to work for someone else.
That's right. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to anyone to do it from scratch. I think a much better path is to get that valuable experience working at a respected, experienced agency with agents who have large books of business and have been able to effectively recruit over many years and negotiate millions, if not billions of dollars worth of contracts. I think that's the more proven path of success. Again, still very hard to break in that way. You have to show your value to an agency that's interested and willing to hire you. To try to do it on your own like I did, you have to be bold, ignorant, or both.
I see. So, talking now, you founded your own company, Heitner Legal. So, can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with this company now?
Sure. This June, we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary. I've been practicing now almost 14 years. So I started it roughly 4 years after beginning to practice, and it's been a blessing. Some of the most interesting matters that I've been able to handle over many years include trademark and copyright related registrations and also enforcement on the plaintiff side and on the defense side when individuals or companies are threatened with legal action or are actually sued in federal court, or now with respect to copyright through the Copyright Claims Board, where we finally actually got our first case. Uh, Various other forms of disputes in state court, federal court, arbitration, a lot of arbitration because a lot of contracts require it, or because in the Players Association's rules, a lot of these sports-related disputes are mandatorily arbitrated through various systems. Outside of that, again, transactional work that may not be intellectual property related. And then I've been able to bring on some really good lawyers who focus on family law, criminal law, and other areas that I'm personally just not interested in. But I'd like to sort of provide this sense to clients that this is a one-stop shop if they want it.
That's interesting. So you have brought on more people to make a more not holistic, but a broader scope.
Yeah, I mean, again, the intention is to make it so that if the client feels very comfortable with the services that we're providing and doesn't want to reach out to other lawyers that there may not have been that built-in trust factor, they can come to us and we can bring in our lawyers who are of counsel.
Mm. Yeah. So how do you build these relationships? I saw some, you know, the big posters with "I love my lawyer" with your, with your picture and everything. So obviously you have a good connection with your clients. So how do you build these relationships?
I try to. Communication's key, being a very active communicator, really explaining things thoroughly, making your clients feel as though they're part of the process. I'm very results oriented. I mean, I take it everything personally, even when I shouldn't. I want to win for my clients. And I think the subjective part of that is super important. I shouldn't be the one who's deciding what a win looks like. I need to fully understand from the very beginning what my client's interests and positions and goals are, and then do what's necessary to accomplish those. At the same time, where I think a lot of lawyers falter is not properly setting expectations in the beginning of the relationship. And I think that is vitally important. I think all those things mixed together, and I'm sure other factors, hopefully, are what leads clients to voluntarily say, I'm not holding a gun to their heads, and voluntarily say that they love their lawyer.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, a lot of clients obviously, like I just picked someone out because like I'm a hockey guy, so Chris Pronger, and also from
Hmm.
the MMA world, Paige VanZant. So I mean, these are
Hmm.
world-class athletes that
Yeah.
you work with. So obviously you have gotten their trust to put their matters in your hands.
I'm blessed. I mean, it's a combination of being a kick-ass lawyer, which I'm not afraid to say I am. I don't think that there's anyone better than me at what I do. But also luck, being at the right place at the right time, having the right clients who are willing to provide the referrals. I forgot how Chris Pronger found me. I think it was word of mouth from somebody else. I know with Paige VanZant, it was a referral from her agent. So we started doing some work with her. Yeah, I mean, it really is. I never take it for granted. I'm always thankful for the opportunity. And, the whole intention at this point is to grow organically, is to do the right thing by my clients and have them be the mouthpieces to properly grow my company. I mean, at this point, fortunately, I'm at the point where I don't need new business, but I'm happy to take it with the right people. So I'm conducting as much diligence on my potential clients as they're hopefully conducting with me.
Yeah, and that, I mean, you have achieved that through hard work, right? You have come to this
Oh
level
yeah.
now that you can be more picky
I,
about what you
I
choose.
think I think I kind of give off this persona that maybe that's not the case. I mean, I look casual. I'm wearing a hat. I'm wearing a t-shirt. I'm not like suited and buttoned up as a lot of other lawyers are. And I spend a lot of time working out, playing pickleball, doing things that I love, spending time with family. So from the outside looking in, it may not seem like I'm working so hard, but if you shadowed me for a day or for a week or a month, you'd realize there's not many lawyers that work harder than I do.
I'm sure. And I have known you for about 15 minutes. So, but what I feel is that you're really competitive. Am I right there?
Yeah. Yeah, as I said earlier, I like to win. And I like to win for my clients. I take it very personally, and I'm not flawless. Over 14 years, have I won every single case? No. Have I won many more than I've lost? Yes. And many more than that, I've settled. And it's hard to say who won or lost in a settlement. I think what a lot of mediators say that I believe is that sometimes it doesn't feel like either side won in a case when there's a settlement. And that's sort of a good settlement typically, where neither side also feels like they've lost. But yeah, I am very competitive, whether it be in my legal practice or as mentioned on the pickleball courts. At the same time, I think it's super important to always be ethical, to be professional, and to never take things too seriously. I hate the lawyers who just act like assholes because they get off on it. That's not me. If anything, I like to kill people with kindness. And in the rare moments where I lose focus of that, I take a step back and I realize, I need to stay true to who I am, which is to never to be aggressive with respect to defending my client's interests, but never to be unnecessarily adversarial just for the hell of it.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. So why sports?
Just because I love it. I mean, I've always had a passion for it. I'm not a tall guy. I am athletic, but I never had any potential of playing anything professionally. Um, if there was ever any way that I could marry sports with negotiation, that's what I wanted to do. Initially, I thought that was being an agent. Ultimately, realized it was to be a practicing lawyer. And again, I'm fortunate that I'm able to marry those loves and practice it on a daily basis.
Hmm. Any work in pickleball, or that's just for fun?
I just started. Yeah, I've started to pick up some clients as the sport has grown economically. Not only athletes, but also teams and product producers. So yeah, we're doing everything from protecting intellectual property rights to reviewing and negotiating contracts. No disputes yet in the pickleball space.
Hmm. It will come.
Oh yeah, yeah, and we'll be there for it. I mean, and I'm starting to make a bigger name for myself just by way of playing. I just played in my first tournament too. So I love it and I hope the sport continues to grow. I think it has challenges from a spectator standpoint, but participation is off the charts. And I think it's only going to grow from here. But I look forward to continuing to play and get better as a player and then hopefully also do more legal work.
Interesting. Um, NIL. That's something that's
Yeah,
been, hot topic, yeah, the last
sure.
year or so. So you're both teaching it and also, of course, working with it a lot. So
I am, yeah.
how
I teach a short compressed course at University of Miami at the School of Law there. I'm teaching that from January 22 to January 27 of this year. I taught it there last year for the first time ever. That's been a very rewarding experience, and it's great to be in front of current students in the law school, in the LLM program, and I think some sports business students as well. And it's very enjoyable to get back into the classroom setting and teach it and hear from students and their perspectives. As far as practicing in the space, it was just a very seamless addition to my existing practice in sports law, where I'm doing a lot of the same things like reviewing, negotiating contracts, protecting intellectual property, handling some disputes. In fact, we started to get some disputes in the NIL space. So it's really been a seamless addition to the existing practice.
yeah. And so the teaching part, you're also an adjunct professor at the University of Florida. And they're doing sports law there. So how do you feel about that? Is something that you want to give back to the up and coming youth, so to speak, or is it something you learn
Yeah,
from, or how do
It,
you see it?
it is altruistic. I mean, I'm really doing it to help the next generation of students who will potentially be practitioners in the world of sports law. Do I get joy out of it? Sure. In the middle of teaching, is it tough? Absolutely. There's a lot of prep that goes into it, even just creating the syllabus and then being organized and ready to teach day to day, as well as running my law firm practice, which does not take a day off throughout the year. It's difficult, but it's also a lot of fun to get back in that classroom setting. And in particular, it's been fun to teach at University of Florida at the Levin College of Law because that is my alma mater. And I remember sitting on the other side in those classrooms and seeing and hearing those professors. So in some respect, I forget my age when I'm doing it. I mean, turning 39 very soon, and I still feel like I'm there as a college student, and I forget about the gap in age between us. It's I get fully immersed in it. It's fun.
Mm. My experience from college was that the adjunct professors that, they are working and teaching, that was something different from your regular professors because you have someone with real life experience that is out there every day and they can teach you something that the other professors might not.
I felt the same way when I was a student, and so I try intentionally to not make it so book heavy in terms of reading materials and more so current events and conversations about recent events as well as where we're going from here. And I try to introduce as many real world examples of contracts or disputes that I've been involved in so that the students can get a real feel as opposed to oftentimes with tenured professors, and this isn't to attack anybody, just from my own experience, you're oftentimes reading from a textbook and it's like case law that's 30, 50 years old and not very relevant. So I try to keep it interesting.
Yeah, I think they appreciate that.
Hopefully.
Uh, how do you have time for everything? We talked about, you said you have a law firm that never stops. You're being an adjunct professor at two universities. You used to have a podcast, right? How to Play the
I,
Game podcast.
yeah,
You're
a
writing
long
the,
time ago. Yeah.
yeah, a newsletter, image and
Yeah.
likeness. And
I got
you
two kids
two kids, a
and
wife,
a
you
wife. Yeah.
wrote a
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. It's tough. As we're doing this podcast here, I'm looking, I think I got about 20 emails that I have to respond to, and we haven't even been talking very long. And other tasks that I just have to get through before the end of the day. So, organization is key, prioritization, and just staying on top of my game. I'd be lying if I said what I do is easy. Could I take a step back and perhaps reduce the amount of workflow? Yeah, but I've loved the growth that my firm has experienced over the past few years. I also love it personally because I get to bear the fruits of that labor. And I'm still young, as I mentioned. I'm 30, I'm turning 39, but relatively, and I feel young. So let me keep up on my grind now and I guess chill out and sip on a colada later in life.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mentioned you wrote a book, How to Play the Game, what every sports attorney needs to know. So just, to plug that, where can the listeners get that book?
So there's three editions. I believe they're all available on the American Bar Association website. They should hopefully also be available on Amazon or wherever else you buy your books. I understand there's an e-version, an electronic version, and also a hard copy. So if you're interested in sports law, even though the third edition, I believe, was written a few years ago, I don't know how many years ago now, maybe only a couple or three, it should still be very relevant to today. So if you are interested, it's a very easy read, even if you're not a law school student or a practicing lawyer. I wrote it in a way that it's easily digestible.
Hmm, that's good. I read somewhere that you wanted to be a sports doctor first, but you couldn't handle blood. Is that right?
I don't know where you read that. It's come up a few times in podcasts probably, but that is true. I think more so my family early in my life pushed me in that direction. But even today, I was just before I came on with you, I went for my yearly checkup and I was looking at my health records. So it reminded me that even when I get blood drawn from me, I almost faint every time, and I have fainted before. So yeah, looking at blood is not up my alley, and being a sports doctor, I would have failed miserably. So being a sports lawyer is a better fit.
That's better, right? Yeah. So you mentioned
I
your
can't remember having to look at blood. Well, actually, I take that back. I once represented an athlete in a few dog bite cases, and I remember there were pictures that were used at a deposition. I believe we settled the case, but there were pictures used at a deposition, and they were so gory that I think I had to take a break. But very rarely does that come into play.
I see. So you mentioned your family pushed you into the doctor path. Was it a doctor or lawyer type of, was that the two the two choices you got from home?
Uh, I guess so. I don't know. My dad and my mom had high aspirations for me, and I guess had like the idea of me being a first in the family to practice law or to be a doctor. I guess I did one of the two. So
There you go.
yeah. Yeah.
Has there been any bumps on the road in your career?
Any what?
Any bumps on the road?
Oh, sure. I would largely say that my effort to be a sports agent was a failure. I worked on building a practice for 3.5 years. I placed some basketball players overseas. I represented some bowlers in their contracts. I helped out some baseball players on the way to the majors, but lost those players to bigger agencies and never really made it a very profitable venture. So I think, in that process, I learned a lot of things, a lot that I've kept with me throughout my career. Um, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm not flawless. I haven't won every single case in my career. I haven't done everything correctly. I'm not so cocky to not be able to admit that. And I do my best to take constructive criticism and learn from my mistakes. And I think we all become stronger, better people if we recognize that we're not flawless, we're human, and that even when we succeed, there are always even teaching moments in that process in which we've succeeded. So I'm always trying to educate myself and make myself better.
Mm. On that topic, what would be your best advice for someone who wants to become a sports lawyer?
I think that the best advice is honestly to chart your own path, that trying to mimic someone else's path and their road to success probably actually lends itself to more failure than success. It's such a crowded space. I shouldn't say, at least in sports lawyer world, it's very crowded, but it's a small area. And I think you have to be exceptional at something in order to break through. For me, I think a big reason why I became successful in the space is my focus on intellectual property and the athlete clients that I was able to get early on and helping them register trademarks and the vast attention that the media paid to that. That helped me get my name out there. Writing for Forbes for 6 years helped me get my name out there. Writing for Inc. for 4 years helped me get my name out there. So, what is it that you're going to do to really break through? And again, I think you have to figure out what separates you, what you're passionate about, and how you are going to break through all of that noise.
Mm. Finding the USP, right? The unique selling point for oneself.
I've never heard of USP as an acronym before,
Mm.
but I may have to adopt that.
Awesome. Then I learned, then I taught you something maybe today,
You
not only the other
did.
way around. There you go.
USP.
Yeah. Is there something I haven't asked you yet that you want to mention?
No, that you asked me great questions. Thank you.
You're good. Awesome. Thank you. So the last question that I ask everyone before I let you go is who from your network do you think would be a good guest on this podcast?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm going to challenge you. Look at my network, see who interests you and who is a best fit, and I'll be happy to make the introduction.
That's awesome. I'll definitely do that.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Darren, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Sports
Ha-
Management Podcast.
Be well.